And we are live. Hi, Tommy.
Hello, fantastic
Hi.
to be live.
Yes. And everyone who's tuning in and are about to tune in, welcome to our live stream series here on LinkedIn called The Future of HI by Jobylon. I'm Sophia, and yeah, I'm sitting here today with a super exciting guest, Tommie Cau, from co-founder of Future Work Labs. How are you today?
Fantastic. It's been a hectic day, so this will just continue with the high energy, I think.
Yeah.
That's our
Uh,
goal at least. But it's quite warm today. It's like humid, warm. It's a bit South Asian kind of warm.
yeah. Yeah, it's definitely summer's kicking in, and I feel like this is the last like hectic weeks before. Like I feel like after midsummer, things are usually slowing down. People are going into vacation mode, but yeah, these are usually hectic weeks.
Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. So I would say that you are a well-known voice within the HR field, and from my experience, not so afraid to challenge old beliefs of what it means to be working.
Sure, I think that
And
shared between the two of us.
perfect. And with the work that you do with Future Work Labs, you're helping companies to not only reimagine their company's definition of the workplace, but also implementing concrete solutions and implementing these new changes. So, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So, we're going to go in concrete and we're going to dive into 5 concrete or possible scenarios for the future of the workplace.
Correct.
So these discussions are no doubt on every HR's agenda right now, and the workplace is, as a matter of fact, continuing to evolve, and so are new working arrangements. And on top of that, we have candidates with new type of expectations when they're stepping into a new role or applying for a new job. So how do we meet these new expectations, and how do we align our workplace with the new world of work, and create a workplace formula that not only works for your company, but that is also attractive to future candidates? But before we dive in super concrete, I just wanted you to, for people that don't know you and don't know the work that you do with Future Work Labs, can you tell us a little bit about that and how your interest for the future work came to life?
Sure, I'd love to, and you can push play on me and on this subject, so you might regret the question, but
Yeah.
anyway, you'll have to stop me. So I've worked within the talent fields like talent HR and work life for the past 15 years, and started off with employer branding, trying to help leaders and companies and HR to attract and retain talent. The Future Work Labs was co-founded by me and Caroline Forsling this spring, so it's a fairly new venture. And
Mm.
it's an interesting mix of backgrounds because Caroline has spent the past 25 years in urban development and real estate. And my background is then more with talent and work life and HR. So we try to mix this. And we spent, actually, we met already 15 years ago when we built Epicenter in the Stockholm city center. And she was part of building Urban Escape, where Microsoft and Spotify and all of those other exciting companies are located. And we spent a lot of time also during the pandemic together trying to figure out what the future of the office will be and what the business model will be, what's the real estate model behind it. And
Mm.
obviously, you quickly realize, as we'll probably come into, that it's not about the office, it's about the city and the city life and the work life and the life in general. And having spent a year and a half on this together, we sort of jumped ship and decided to start a venture focusing completely on this. So an insights hub and accelerator, trying to take the ideas from ideas to reality. And part of the work that we've done is probably what we're going to talk about today.
That's so exciting, and it's very aligned with the times that we live in today. I know you've been talking about these questions before the pandemic as well. So, and I feel like sometimes people weren't really ready for those conversations, but they were pushed into that direction, or yeah, they were forced into having to think about these questions.
Definitely, definitely forced.
Yeah,
In a good
and
way.
yeah, I think a lot of companies throughout these past 2 years have been, I usually call it a sort of identity crisis, because the world is undoubtedly changing. And who do we want to be in the midst of that change? And especially looking forward, or like moving forward, how do we create that change that also reflects what our employees want and what future employees want? And it can be difficult. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of people are facing right now, to know what direction we want to go in. And also because of the fact that there's no perfect answer. There's no perfect formula, that universal formula that works for everyone. So people
Right.
or companies kind of need to figure out their own way and experiment within their own organization. And this is exactly what you're helping companies with, to kind of go from like, okay, we want to change, but
Yeah.
how do we like implement those changes, and
Or
what do
we,
we actually want?
or I'm laughing a bit, or we don't really want to change, but we need to try to figure out the change. And I think
Right.
really the topic of today, right? I think we call it the big awakening, which is the single most important thing to drive right now, which is the big awakening in top management, um,
Mm,
because it all starts there. So how do we address this question? How do we address it from a business value point of view, and not necessarily interior or layout or office contracts, etc. And I think that's the big opportunity. It was there, just as you referred to, pre-COVID pandemic, but now all of a sudden the formula that we've used for 100+ years is not really working. We cannot copy and paste it from company A to B in the same way we've done. So we need to
yeah.
figure out our way,
Do you
which
feel
is
like
the complex question.
it truly is? That's why there's no like direct answer and no simple solution. But the companies that you work with, do you feel like they're ready for that change, or is a part of the work to kind of make them ready for that change, or like where are
Definitely.
they at mentally?
No. Definitely, part of the work is to make them ready for it. I mean, I think we have a bit of a change fatigue coming out of the pandemic, and I see a lot of companies and leaders and HR executives, in one way, sort of dying to address other questions than this one, because we've addressed this question so much during the pandemic. But it's been more of
Yeah,
a straight line. Now it's more complex, it's more hybrid, it's more down to who do we want to be as a company. And also we're still waiting for some evidence following the spring sort of return to the office period, and the data around that. So I think the autumn of 22 will be very exciting, and I think that's when we need to start to take even more action.
yeah. I feel like we're going through a social experiment, a global social experiment right now.
For sure. But then obviously, as you to your question, a lot of companies are super ready for this, and they've been ready for some time, and they took some gradual steps already before the pandemic now, naturally. But if you look at
Yeah,
the majority of the market, there's still a lot of work to be done, and probably some tough decisions to be made. And then you need some data evidences, inspiration, examples, looking at some of the companies that are a bit ahead, uh, and not copy and pasting, but still we need to test and learn now.
yeah, yeah. And seeing to believe, kind of seeing that other people are doing it and that it works, it makes it easier to take that step. I feel like it's hard to be the first one. So
Sure.
it's important to have those role models. But if we're going to those, you created 5 possible scenarios for the future of the workplace. Do you want to dive into each and one of them, and explain a little further like what they mean?
Sure. I'd love to. So everyone, please buckle up, because it's different perspectives on this, and that's also part of the point. Because just a quick background, we looked at what's the office of the future. What do we actually need as people and employers or businesses, and what's the business model around it? Because the business model for workplace and offices has been more or less the same for decades and decades.
Yeah.
We did some major research. We did a big dig more than a year ago. Yeah, quite more than a year ago, to see what do we know so far. We looked at research and science and surveys and articles and examples, had lots of conversations. And based on that, because a lot of this came out during the pandemic, then we had a lot of it before, right? And this is the work that I think every organization should and can do, but we've fast tracked it for those who are interested. So based on that, we developed 5 hypotheses of not necessarily the office, but the future work life. Because again, it's not about the office specifically; it's about work life in general. And
Yeah.
based on those 5 hypotheses, we ended up in 5 scenarios that sort of met those different hypotheses. And what's fascinating when you work with scenarios is that you don't necessarily have to stick to what you have. That's the whole point. But when you work with innovation and scenario planning, you need to look a few years ahead and sort of let go of what you have today. And this is so true when it comes to the question of the workplace and the office, because the old way of working, or the old model, or in a sense the current model, it's very fixed. So we really need to lift a bit. But then the 5 hypotheses that we saw and developed was that hybrid work is actually becoming the new standard. And it's still not true yet, although you read the news and you figure out, yeah, hybrid is for everyone, but
Yeah.
far from true at this point. And then we don't necessarily know what hybrid is, but we'll come back to
I
that.
feel like that's everyone has their own definition of what hybrid means.
Sure, yeah, and because we all sort of, the majority invented it pretty recently, apart from some organizations. But the other scenario is that other hypothesis is that what happens if everyone works remotely? The new normal is that everyone works remotely. What happens then? And then we looked at one hypothesis that was, there's an increasing interest in the closeness or proximity of the workplace, and it sort of challenges the HQ. We will never go to an HQ, or a lot fewer of us will go to the HQ. We will go to some place more nearby. And then we also looked at time with, high intense project work is becoming more standard, and it challenges or even replaces 9 to 5. This is, by the way, probably the biggest shift that remains if we look 10, 20 years ahead. It's the time perspective. A lot of the other things we've sort of rocked the boat quite a lot in the past few years, but time is still to be rocked in a sense.
So
And
we're
then
not looking at the 9 to 5 anymore. We're looking at the outcome more than.
Yeah, and also more intense periods. So you travel in or you work remotely for a very intense project, because more and more in life and business and deliveries are organized in projects and teams. So they sort of self-organize, and then 9 to 5 is not as important. And this all connects to also scalability, right? So organizations are becoming more scalable. So we looked at these 5 hypothesis and see what would this mean for the workplace, and that led us to these 5 scenarios, where the first scenario is what we call the hybrid scenario, which is very much goes head to head on what companies are actually saying. So we want to be in the office 2 to 3 days per week, while we also look at optimizing the real estate usage and the environmental footprint, as well as the workplace experience then. So this is about taking hybrid one step further. So in short, it's the sharing economy for office. So essentially, companies share the same space, the same square meters, but different days during the week. So company A uses the office Monday and Tuesday, and then it's restaged and rebranded for company B using it Wednesday to Friday. And non-office days are then spent at home or at another remote location. And the trick here is then to fine-tune the rebranding and the restaging using modern scenography and technology, where you have some floors that are simply different branded, different days in the week, but then you have a ground floor which is more of an open house with co-working, conference, coffee shop, restaurants, and all of those things, showrooms where you can actually access 24/7, 365. And the main question here is, do we really need, in a post-COVID and future work life, do we really need an office 24/7, 365? Should we pay for an office? Should we heat an office? Should we staff an office with all the support functions when we know that occupancy might be 20%, 30%? So that's the first scenario, which is we've gained a lot of interest, but it's very challenging for some to see how do we actually do this. But it's completely possible. We've looked at all possible problems and opportunities around this. But then it's also about whether you're company A and B, really to choose what's the purpose of meeting. When you're there Monday, Tuesday, it needs to be optimized for getting together. And then you need more of a community, more facilitation, other things that make sense.
That's an interesting point of view, because I think if you have a fixed mindset or an idea of like, yeah, but work looks this way, or you have meetings Mondays and Fridays, and you have this idea of what work looks like for you, and stepping into a new way of working, like a new infrastructure, means that the way we work needs to change as well, and we need to adapt to the hybrid type of way, which means that we might not have meetings, might not be so necessary. We might be able to communicate in different types of ways, especially having employees sitting back home or sitting somewhere else, or just not being like physically in the same space. So yeah, that's super interesting.
And it's also it's different from now because it's fixed days. So it includes a structure that is easy to sort of immerse yourself in. It's like Monday, Tuesday, it's fixed, it's simple, easy to understand, and we will go from having maybe 20% occupancy to maybe 80% on those days. It will never be 100, but still. Moving on to the second scenario, it goes even further. So that's the on-demand scenario. So companies are working 100% remotely, with different places put together based on current need. So we work remotely. People are geographically spread out. As you and me, we are very seldomly nearby geographically. You travel the globe, but there's an interest and a need and a willingness to meet. So throughout the year, we will still meet physically. But what happens then, instead of having a fixed office that we all need to go to, regardless the purpose of meeting, the space we choose or the place we choose is optimized for the business value that we need to create. So it could be we spend a week in a kitchen cooking together. It can be we go to Barcelona or Marbella for a month because we need the values we get from there. Or we go to a conference venue or a co-working space because we work very intensely in a project or what it might be. So this is a way of operating your company in a different way. It's a way of operating your culture and developing your culture in a different way. And most people go, oh, nice, so I can save a lot of cost then because I don't need the office. And I'm like, yeah, maybe, or the cost might be higher.
Yeah.
But it potentially goes from an overhead cost to a business line cost because it supports the teams and projects more. So that's the second, and the third scenario is the satellite scenario, where you have smaller places closer to where people live, supplementing the HQ. So smaller company, smaller offices, but pooled together with other companies in sort of a city kind of environment, but in the suburban areas, where you have a quicker access. This goes, towards the 15-minute city idea, where you need the closeness, but you also need all the services and the pulse, etc. And this is crucial for this scenario, because if you put people in a dull, boring, gray, industrial hotel office kind of place in the suburbs, people won't go there either. They will stay at home. Yeah. They won't go to HQ, and they won't go there. They'll just stay at home. So it's a matter of putting this together nicely, but it's supplementing the HQ. And then we have the fourth scenario. I'm speeding up a bit, which is the opposite to on demand, which is called the community office. This is where your employer goes all in. It's the 24/7 office optimized for a more movable and mobile, in a sense, variable workforce, where You work a lot more project intense. People fly in, or they travel in. They spend a week, a month, or 3 months, or 3 days, and they work intensely. And you want them to be completely immersed in your brand and the community of the employer and the place. So rather than pushing them into anonymous hotel,
Mm,
have um, apartments, you have training facilities, you have everything you need for a 24/7 life on site at your main or headquarters. So all the
right.
services you possibly need, branded to completeness, in a sense. And this is not so common yet in Sweden, but on a more global context, there are companies doing this or similar to this. So I think this will happen, especially if we move. You might move to Åre in Sweden from Stockholm, and you're coming in for 2 days a week, or 1 week a month. It doesn't have to be the developers from India we're flying in. This can apply to the Swedes just moving out of the city centers.
Yeah. And we can see that in the statistics as well, how more people are moving out from big cities around the world. So there's definitely a want for something, a different living situation.
For sure. And while some will choose not to have an office at all, there will be this category that really want the flagship version, and they will
Yeah.
spend uh, more, far more than they did pre-pandemic, because pulling people together in a good way. And then just quickly, the fifth scenario is the scale-up scenario, which is the most difficult scenario from a real estate point of view. It's when the CEO says, I would love to have a smaller fixed office, which is completely branded with our identity, and it's like really going into our world. But I'd like the option to scale it up by 3 or 4 times whenever I want to or need to. It can be you onboard loads of people. It can be like you're developing a new venture and you need more space. It can be that you're working with clients in projects that needs a space. So it's fixed and movable square meters, where it's again more optimized for the business value you need to create. So if you have 5 floors in a building, it might be that floor 4 or 5 are fixed offices, and then the other floors are optional, and you need to pay for that option. And the market now will obviously need to decide what's it worth to pay for the option, because real estate companies, they love long contracts
Yeah.
and fixed spaces, and this goes challenges that.
Yeah, it kind of goes a little bit against what they want, at
Yeah,
least.
but this is
So
where things will move, and then it's a matter of how quickly.
yeah, it's super interesting to hear. And of all these 5 scenarios, which one do you believe is the most common? Like, what do people, or what do companies usually lean towards?
Sure. That's a good question. And I think if you look at satellite, it sort of already exists in a different shape and form. It's not as attractive, but it exists. Community also exists partly because you have company apartments. It's sort of the next generation of that. Hybrid is super interesting for a lot of people, but it's difficult the logistics. It's more like running an event, like the Globe, the Avicii Arena in Stockholm. It's like you need to look at it in a different way. And then on demand is for some super interesting, but that's the most challenging for most organizations, because most are not built for remote first.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much about finding your own, and what makes sense for, even not even as large as like the whole organization, but within different departments. It might make sense for some departments to have a different type of flexibility because it makes sense for that role, whereas other departments might not have. So it's really about finding that perfect solution. But what do you believe?
So I was just pointing out that you're onto a very important question, because if we look even more towards the future, I mean, workspaces and offices will most likely support teams more than it supports organizations moving forward. Because again, if we work more with projects, more in teams, and we have a whole trend of decentralization, obviously, and if space will be more readily available, the business line managers or the local HR or the local team members can actually have the mandate to purchase space more easily and quickly. So goes along the lines of your comment. This, I firmly believe this, at least. And then there will still be, you know, head offices and overhead costs and workplaces that goes for everyone. But
exactly, and that might not even be called office. There might be a meeting spot, or
probably
because
not.
that's the thing. There's a lot of memes going around, especially during the pandemic, where those cubicles, dark. It's like sitting in a dark black hole, and it's
Yeah.
like, is this what you want to bring back? Is this how you want to bring back employees to the office? I think for people to, or for organizations to kind of redefine the office, you have to find out the why first of all, and also find a way to align it to the new world of work. It might not be. I mean, the less forced it feels like, the more people actually want to do it, because it doesn't feel like there's something you have to do.
Right. Completely agree. And the spring experience now and the data from spring 22 will give us some indications on how easily are people coming back. I hear great examples where the majority and way more are back, and then other examples where you have occupancy on 14%, and it's like, yeah, what how do you go from there?
Yeah, that's an exciting thing, because we're living in a world where we don't have the data right now, right? So we're kind of navigating in nothingness. It's just like the discussions about social media and the way that it impacts us long term. We don't know how it impacts us long term, but the more data we get, the more we will actually be able to make more solid decisions.
Sure. Yeah. And for us to get the data as well, we need to test and learn and pilot, and we need to do things to actually get the data we want. So I usually tell
Exactly.
people and clients, like, when do you know you need to do an office change or workplace change? Like, you have a lease that's being terminated in 3 years or 2 years or whatever. It's like, this is a perfect learning opportunity. So what do you need to have learned by the time you're renegotiating, or by the time you want to move the office or whatever? And that can be then the catalyst for discussing and debating the big question, which is, who do we want to be? Why do we gather? What do we gather around? And what kind of work-life mix will we offer moving forward? As long as you have the office as a fixed space, it hinders some of the discussions. Well, it can hinder.
Yeah, you kind of have to take. I saw that the CEO of Airbnb wrote, I don't know if it was a post or an article, but he was like, imagine if the office didn't exist. And I like that so much, because it was like, yeah, we have to completely start from a fresh, like from an empty piece of paper. And I think that's where the new ideas, that's where we can flourish. Because if we're still thinking, we're still, like you mentioned in the beginning, like the way of working has been existing since the Industrial Revolution. We're working 9 to 5 as a way. That was a way for industrial workers to get better working conditions. And we're living in a very different world now. So how can we align that? So I think we need to kind of start from scratch in order to think more clearly as well.
Yeah, this goes back to the whole scenario work that we've done. If you do that in a even moderately ambitious way, you find yourself being a bit more released from what you have today. You can look a bit more ahead. And I think what's true now is that we talked about the future of work 5 years ago, and it was somewhere far into the future, and then in a few months a lot of things started to move and happened, and then we need to start the discussion now and the work now in the new present state, and not go back to having the old as the starting point. It goes for everything: consumer electronics, travel, and social media, and brand building. You can't do it the way if you started doing it in a new way that works better, you can't go back and doing it in the old way, because people will not like it.
Exactly. So we're kind of running out of time, but I want to ask you as well. What do you believe is the biggest? We kind of touched on it a little bit, but I just want to hear your thoughts on it. The biggest roadblocks for employees for companies today when figuring out their new normal or their new definition of the office?
Sure, and I think it differs between sort of the everyday employee and the top management or managers. I think employees around the globe right now are looking for clarity and a lot, which knowing how can we work, what can we do. Top management say one thing, team management says another. Spain says one thing, Sweden says one thing, division X one, division Y is something different. And then also I think it has to do with the culture, which is the acceptance towards remote work or hybrid work. Actually running things remotely is people are not really equipped, which has to do with skills being a roadblock, skills in new ways of working, running, doing things like we do now, for example, or running virtual workshops, creative processes. For managers, I think it has to do with time and interest to address the bigger question, frankly. Not necessarily how do we get people back to the office, but some of the other questions that we were addressed here. And then the ability to shift mindset from cost to revenue, because we claim that we need to start looking at the workplace as a revenue driver, not a cost driver. From you mentioned the Industrial Revolution, it was a cost driver to gather people in the office, and it needs to be productive. And then obviously a roadblock is leadership. At the end of the day, leadership skills to run in this new normal, creating psychological safety, trust, communicating when you don't meet people, making sure that people are okay. I work a lot with mental health, which is a major topic right now following the pandemic. It was before, by the way, but it sort of increased. And then how do you build culture remotely into the nitty-gritty details? Because before, when everyone just automatically came to the same place, we didn't really have to address too many aspects of some of these issues. But now we need to address them into the nitty-gritty details, which is definitely a roadblock, because then it also takes more energy and time.
Yeah.
Long answer to short question, sorry.
No, but it's super interesting. And when it comes to leadership as well, it's the more technologically advanced we become, the more we need to apply that human aspect. And
Sure.
Doing that through a screen is, like you said, we have to go to the nitty-gritty. We have to really look at every angle and every aspect of it, because every word matters. Because that's we use Slack, we use Teams, we use all these kind of tools, and we need to create a different type of leadership where we're still making sure that even the discussion about diversity and inclusion, like how do we create an inclusive environment remotely, there's a lot of challenges that comes with being not physically in the same space. So it's super interesting. I know we're running out of time, but I want to ask you one last question. I feel like we have to go into this. So I usually, like when I talk to customers or just people in general that are interested in the same topic, I usually ask them like, okay, but what do you think? We talk a lot about the future of work and the kind of directions that we think we're going like. But if you were looking at the workplace 2040, what is your take there? How do you feel like how will the office, will we scratch the office? Will 9 to 5 be, a thing in the past? How do you, your personal opinion, how do you visualize the workplace 2040?
So my personal opinion is that this is the billion-dollar question in a sense, but my personal opinion is that we will still have traditional offices. People will still work 9 to 5. This is a very slow-moving market. We need to remember that. And I spent a fair share of my time during the pandemic in the real estate, working with the real estate sector. And it is slow for various reasons. Legislation, work environment regulations, also slow. Having said that, I think there will be some major shift. I think it will be more differentiation. So rather than everyone have the same kind of offices, we will have more different solutions. People will make different bets. I think the 5 scenarios that we've talked about today will definitely be part in the mix one way or the other. And I think we need to address a lot more, again, the flexibility part we've addressed. We need to look at technology and automation. How can that support the workplace? Learning is, obvious in a sense, but then also inclusion. How easy it is to belong to this workplace. How much of a plug and play scenario do you offer, and how do you work with health? Again, mental health will not become a smaller problem. It will become a bigger problem. That's just the case. If we look at it in one visual idea out of the things that we've talked about, I think the on-demand scenario will be one of the area, or maybe the area where things have progressed the most relative to where we are today, because the whole world around us becomes on demand and plug and play, pay and go, etc. So I think that will happen. And the last part I'm going to comment is that I think by 2040 we will be a lot more virtually integrated. So I'm at home today, but in 2040 my wall here will be a big LED screen where I can connect with my teams and my colleagues, so I can almost be tapped on the shoulder. The technology is here in a sense, but we need to figure out how do we integrate that, so we make sure that the people that are not sitting in the same place are still close to 100% included. We have the coffee machine talk, etc. I think this by 2040 we will have solved many times over.
Yeah, I love that. And there's a lot of virtual workplaces out there. So it might not be about, that physical space anymore. It might be about just creating that shared experience no matter where you're located.
Yeah, agree.
Amazing. So yeah, we're running out of time, unfortunately, but thank you so much, first of all, Tommie, for sharing your valuable insights. We definitely need to do like a part 2 of this. I feel like we haven't finished the discussions yet.
Sure, love to.
Yeah, and insights on this topic. And thank you everyone for tuning in today. We will add your email address and all the social channels that you want to share afterwards. So feel free to get in touch with Tommie to continue discussing these interesting topics. And this live conversation will also be posted on YouTube afterwards. So everyone who didn't have time to tune into the full session, you'll be able to do that afterwards. But thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Sophia.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Take care.